let's not lean against the table. Let's kind of sit here. Okay? If you'd like to come and sit in front of me, I have a little 3 stories to tell. Come on, Max. I have 3 stories to tell. Today is called All Saints Day. And our prayer at the beginning said, knit together your elect in one communion and fellowship. Does anybody know how to knit? You use 2 needles. Oh, Teresa knows how to knit. You use needles, and we knit sweaters and scarves and hats and gloves and all those separate little long stringy pieces of wool or cotton become, when they're together, something beautiful and useful. Well, I brought my little bag. It's not knit, is it? It's plastic. Plastic. But look at this. What do you suppose this is? Well, I want to tell you, and look at all the colors. Let's see if we can figure out how many colors. We got pink, blue, white, green, red, yellow, purple, yep, pink, some brown, some orange, some black, some brown. Yeah, very cool. Now, I don't think I would want to use this tea. No. Because this little piece was knit together about 25 years ago. And I have kept it all these years, not because it's worth a lot of money, but because it reminds me of something very special. It was knit together by a person to describe what the church is like. That the church, and another word for the church is, guess what? The saints. The saints. That the church is made up of what? All different kinds of colors and people. People who are kind of curly and people who are kind of straight. People who like bright colors and people who are kind of plain. People who are fiery for right, like these red ones. And people who are gentle in their love of Jesus, like this beautiful little piece of pink that probably was meant for a baby's clothing. This reminds me of all the saints, of all of us. And you know, I think even I could fit into this kind of, yes, Patsy, thing. It looks like a hat, but it really is only meant to be an image. Like a cross is an image of Jesus' love, an image of all the saints. All different, some kind of fading. All the saints. Okay, the thing I want to talk to you about on All Saints Day is the baptism. Now, there was a crisis this morning because usually for baptisms we have a shell, a little shell from the ocean that we use, a different shell for each child, and then they are given the shell afterwards. And I told Miss Elizabeth yesterday that I would bring some shells from my house. And guess what? I forgot to do it. I forgot to bring shells from my house. Well, I went into the kitchen where Miss May Helen was fixing our wonderful breakfast. And we talked about the fact that with 17 children being baptized, we didn't think there were enough shells here. I might have to drive 10 miles back to my house to get enough shells. And then Elizabeth said, well, they're going to be 15. Is that right now? Is it 15 or 14? It's 14. It's 14. So she said it was going to be 15. I came in there. Would you do me a favor, Tamonte, and hand me that plate, that glass plate full of shells? Thank you very much. And I started counting. That's a lot of children. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That is the big shell that has the oil in it that the bishop prayed over, called oil. 15 shells. That's exactly how many people were being baptized. And then I heard that there were going to be 14. And I thought, well, you know, there might be somebody else that God is just waiting to baptize another time, right? Because God has room for so many people in God's family. It's a good thing. I'm going to put the extra shell right there for next time. But I thought, you know, God knew what we needed for our baptisms today. We have just enough shells, one to grow on. Will you put this back where you found it? Please come on to it. Thank you. So here's the third story. I was in the state of Tennessee this last week. I have some friends whose parents had a cabin way up in the mountains. And they had that cabin for years and years and years. But it was so old and they hadn't taken quite enough care of it. And guess what started happening? It started turning to powder because the termites came and the carpenter bees came. So they decided it was time to build a different cabin. And here's what happened. I think this is a very cool story. They decided, first of all, to build a cabin that was very green, that was very energy efficient, that really cared for the environment because it's so beautiful out there. But then they thought, how are we going to get rid of this old cabin? And you know what they did? They called all the different fire departments around and said, would you all like to burn down our cabin and do a training program? Long story, they had a training program. They started a little bitty fire and they practiced getting people out of a tall window and lifting people over a short window and going in really low to the fire and using their hoses. And then finally they let it burn down in the middle of the field. And out of the ashes, out of the death of that cabin came eventually a new cabin. Now the saints who built that cabin have died. But their children and grandchildren have their pictures all over the new cabin. And they come together as a family from Rhode Island and from South Carolina and from Georgia and from the other end of Tennessee. And they spend time together. They sort of get knit together at that cabin when they spend time together, like a family reunion, right? So I'm up there at this cabin, and it snowed. It snowed. The whole roof, which was red, turned white. My two dogs didn't quite know what to do because they're not used to snow, are they? We don't get a lot of snow. And then one night, I couldn't sleep for some reason. And I woke up. And I finally just got up and I went out of bed. And you know when it's kind of snowy and rainy, and it was pretty snowy and rainy the whole time. We even had hail, those little round pieces of ice. We had all kinds of weather. They can be big sometimes, can't they? I decided to look out, and it was very bright outside. And I thought, it's 3 o'clock. Why is it so bright outside? And then I realized that the clouds had gone away. But I still couldn't figure out, because, you know, we were in a cabin in the middle of the mountains, and there weren't any lights on around us for miles and miles. And so I put on my coat over my pajamas, and I went outside, and I looked up. And there were so many stars in the sky that they were lighting up the view. Not a moon, not the sun, but so many bright stars that you can't see here in Latin. Huh? Were there planets? Do you know that's such a great question for us? There are so many bright stars that I can't tell which one is Venus. Venus is often the brightest one, and that's a planet. They were so bright. And I started singing a tune in my head for some reason. I thought, what is this tune? Do you ever start singing a tune in your head? And I realized I was singing a tune for All Saints Day. And the first line is, who are these like stars appearing? And the hymn goes on, if you want to look at it later, it's 286. It talks about how the saints are like the stars I saw. They are countless. You can't count them, there's so many. The longer I looked, the more I saw. All these people living and dead who have done 3 things. They have loved God, they have loved others, and they have loved themselves, all in the way that Jesus asks us to love. So as you are going to be baptized, and you have already been baptized, think about what it means to be a saint. Think about the fact that God always provides enough to welcome us, like the shells. That God rejoices in the fact that it takes all kinds of people knit together to make God's family. All kinds of people. And that the world and the heavens are filled and we are surrounded with saints to help us in our loving ourselves and our neighbor and God in the way that Jesus does. Okay, you can go back to your